And the mistake we make is that the first bus that comes in, everybody's getting onto it. And we also want to jostle and get onto it because we see everybody getting onto it. And then we are not pausing to think, hey, is this bus going to take me to where I want to go?
This is episode number 56 of The Inspiring Talk with author and speaker Prakashs Iyer. Welcome guys to The Inspiring Talk. My name is Bijay Gautam. I'm host for this show. Each week I interview today's most successful and inspiring personalities to help you realize your inner potential. Thank you so much guys for joining me on this episode of The Inspiring Talk podcast. I'm very pumped for my guest Prakashs Iyer. Prakash is a best-selling author of books like The Habit of Winning and The Secret of Leadership. He's also a speaker who speaks extensively about leadership, teamwork, and winning. He has already given multiple TEDx talks on those topics, and I love the way he derive analogies from the simple things from our day-to-day life and share powerful lessons on his talks. Before becoming a full-time author and a speaker in 2015, Prakash was managing director of Kimberly-Clark Liver and in past has served in several leadership roles in different multinational companies such as PepsiCO, Hindustan Unilever, and so on. His latest book is You Too Can, where Prakash takes you up close and personal with 20 Indian entrepreneurs as they share the lessons that they have learned. I have met Prakash few months back after recording interview for the first time, which I lost as my laptop crashed, but Prakash is very humble and agreed to do this again. And one thing that I love the most about him is the way he put forth his brilliant ideas, and when you are around him, you can feel his aura and you start believing in your dreams. On this episode, we discuss on a wide range of topics from entrepreneurship to building teams, leadership, finding your true calling, and a lot more. Make sure that you share this episode with your friends by visiting theinspiringtalk.com/56. And if this is your first time listening to this podcast, make sure to subscribe by searching for The Inspiring Talk on Apple Podcast, Castbox, or any other podcast app so that you won't miss any upcoming episodes. Now, without further ado, let me welcome the one and only Prakashs Iyer. Welcome back inside this episode, guys. I have with me Prakashs Iyer today. Prakash, thanks for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bijay, for having me here.
Thank you so much for your time again. We are recording this for the second time, and as I lost the entire recording when my hard disk crashed. But after our conversation last time, quite a few things happened. As I mentioned, the first thing that happened was I lost the recording, and also you have helped me strengthen the belief that, I too can. And this week I quit my job, and I think this is the perfect time for us to have this conversation.
Congratulations.
Oh, yes. I have these fingers crossed, but I think I can take that chance. So before we dive in, would you like to talk about your origin story, your childhood, and how your growing years were like and all that sort of stuff?
Oh, a very regular middle-class existence, I think. A very loving family, an elder brother and an elder sister, parents who, I think, for whom family meant everything. So that's really how it all started. Went to school, lived in different cities, and maybe that's impacted me a little bit. So, was born in Jaipur, lived a bit there, went to Delhi, lived in Mumbai. So have traveled around a little bit in the country.
Are you an army kid?
No,
Okay.
I wish I was though.
Oh, that happens usually with the armies.
Armed forces, yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of how any of that might have impacted me later in my life, maybe a couple of things that I learned. So as a little kid, I can still remember, I was maybe 5 years old, and there was this chap who would take me on a bicycle to school and then bring me back. So that was his job. And he would take me on the bicycle. I'd be riding with him and he'd take me to school, bring me back. But at age 5, my parents told me that I had to carry my own bag.
Okay.
So the bag is not something he would carry. I would have to carry my own bag. And At that stage, as a 5-year-old, try to carry one of those school bags can look a little difficult, especially when the other man is being paid to kind of take you to school and bring you back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that lesson's kind of stayed with me for the rest of my life, and I take great pride in that little lesson. And I think it's not just about carrying my own bag as a 5-year-old, but I think it's taught me some fairly significant lessons in my life, and that I think is a message that I would probably give to other people. Make sure that you ensure your kids are carrying their own bags,
Mm-hmm.
not depending on someone else to do that for them. I also think I learned a lot from my father, and some of the skills that I might have today, or some of the interests that I might have today, and I specifically refer to perhaps I like to write, I like to speak a bit, I like to tell stories, and I think all three of these are things that I picked up from my father, who helped me in my early years and encouraged me.
Mm-hmm.
And I still remember writing a little, maybe 70-word joke for my school magazine, but just being encouraged to try and do that and to get it published in the school magazine, and then to be able to pick up that school magazine and see that it says at the bottom of that Prakash Iyer,
True.
class 4B, it's something that kind of said, wow, that feels so cool.
Yeah, and that also helps you feel more confident about yourself because you are now published, right? You see your name published, and that really helps you in fueling or having that confidence in yourself. Yeah, I can do this too.
That is so true, Vijay. That is so true. So I think these early memories, some incidents from my childhood, will probably remain etched in my life, and I'm thankful. I'm grateful for all that might have happened. So that's really where we are. And then, of course, school and college and work. And maybe something that's been consistent for me has been the opportunity to meet with some fantastic people.
Mm-hmm.
I made some great friends early in life. I had some fabulous colleagues who continue to be friends. And I'm really grateful for that, because I think I've tended to be the kind of person who always looked at other people and said, wow, this is so much fun. And, I try and understand what other people are doing, what's driving them, what's making them who they are. So in a sense, for me, school and college has been this laboratory of people who, even after I finished formal education, continued to teach me, continued to inspire me, continued to kind of tell me maybe there are different things that we can do in our lives, and that's probably added to the color in my life.
Yeah, and one thing that you have mentioned is that your dad helped you in taking up writing and storytelling. And to me, you are very, very interesting storyteller. And the way you share your stories and derive values and listen from the smallest thing possible, that is really fascinating. So could you share something that your dad might have told you, or if there is anything that you could remember, or maybe some things that your dad made you to do so that, you build up this interest in storytelling or writing?
Like a lot of things that happen in our lives, I think when they happen to you, you don't realize how significant they might be.
Yes.
It's only when you look back that, in a manner of speaking, you connect the dots and say, maybe that's where it all started and that's how it all began. And for me, I distinctly remember, Vijay, there was a school debate that I was participating in. And the topic of the debate was the goal of education is employment. And I was speaking against the motion.
Okay.
And as you might expect as a little kid, it's, you can't really make too much sense of it, and then you depend on someone to help you. And I was here sitting with my father, and my dad was trying to explain to me how I might argue the case against the motion that the goal of education is employment.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. He just picked up on the word "the," and the entire thing was then to say that, you're not disagreeing that a goal of education is employment. But to argue that it is the goal, meaning that it is the only reason why you need education, is preposterous. And I thought that was such a fabulous way to pick that up. And then he gave me an example, and he said, he basically tried to say, look at education and employment as, let's say, elephants and animals. Elephants is education, employment is animals. Okay. And he says that, all education helps a little bit in employment, et cetera, is true, which is to say that, education helps with employment. When you say it's the thing, that the only reason
True.
why education is needed in employment is like saying that all animals are elephants, which is not true. So, and I still remember the crowd going crazy that day in school, and, I became a bit of a mini hero, just using the example of elephants and animals to try and make the point about education and employment. And I said, wow, this is cool. if you can tell people, if you can move it away from an abstract conceptual piece around education and employment and make it come alive by telling them about elephants and animals and how that might work, people get it. And people remember, and I still remember, a year later, maybe two, some of the kids in school would come and tell me, about elephants and animals. And I said, wow, this is powerful. It worked in the debate that day. It's memorable. And perhaps if I was to try and think back, maybe that's what got me into this idea of saying that there are simple things in our lives, but if you can find a story, you can communicate your point way better than you might otherwise be able to do it.
It's very interesting, and I think it's very powerful as a kid to get those opportunities. And once you feel that sense of confidence, as you mentioned, becoming that mini hero, and I can totally relate to that because I was in 5th grade when I participated on debate competition like that, and the topic was village life is better than the city life, and I have to draw those examples and everything. And after after that speech, even though I did it all myself, and the points that I made or put forward on that debate were not strong enough, very, very simple points which made people laugh, but what it in turn has done to me was people coming to me and talking, wow, that was good. I mean, even though they were making it up, but that helped me feel like I was on top of everything. Oh my God, I can speak in front of these 100, 150 students in front of school. That means, And the reason that I'm bringing this up is one thing that recently I have, once I, looked back at those early days in my own life, what I have realized was there has always been people who kept telling me that, wow, you are doing great. I mean, keep going, keep moving. You are amazing. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think that kind of surrounding of the people telling me, you are doing good, you are doing good, you are doing good. And, keep going, keep going, keep going. And when you hear that kind of things as a kid, that definitely builds that very strong confidence, right? So, and that has been happening, till my entire school days, in my college days. That gives me a super confidence, and I think that's something that I can draw from what you just shared, like having people around and making your kid feel special about the smallest thing that they might do builds that strong self-confidence, which is super important, right?
I think it's a great point you make, Vijay. Absolutely right. And maybe there's a little other thing that I might want to talk about very quickly, which is,
sure.
I remember that as a little kid, I was asked to speak on Republic Day. So I think that the flag hoisting, I'm forgetting now whether it was Republic Day or Independence Day, but we had a flag hoisting ceremony in school. And here was this little kid, and I had to speak for all of 30 seconds. I think I had to say some 5 lines.
Mm-hmm.
And I had memorized those lines completely. And the big day arrived, and I stood up went up on stage when my name was called, and I stood at attention to speak those simple 5 lines that I had to for those 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And for what looked like the 30 seconds suddenly looked like 6 hours, but not a single word came out of my mouth. I just froze. I just froze. I was nervous as hell. I had no clue where I was. And that was my first taste of trying to do something like this and getting it wrong. And I think that's an important memory too.
Yeah.
So, it's all right. I tried something, I failed, but that didn't kind of scare me or deter me. I came back and I spoke. And even today, if I have to speak today after all these years, and I enjoy it, I love, that's what I do for a living, how I speak. And I still find that before I go up on stage, there is a little sense of butterflies in the stomach. I hope it goes well. I hope people feel good about it. I hope I can kind of get it right.
Yeah.
But I think that's the other important piece. I think it's good to have failed. It's good to have got it wrong. And, and it teaches you to come back. It teaches you that it's okay and don't let it kind of hold you back. I think a lot of people are scared to try things because they're scared that they might fail. And I think if you can overcome that fear, there's, I think, joy and happiness at the other end of that hurdle.
So now, after school, you went on to take on regular job, right? What happened after you completed your school or education? Let's talk a bit about how you started on your professional journey.
So interesting. While I was in college, I wrote copy for an advertising agency in Mumbai and made some pocket money out of it. But that was another interesting experience. It got me interested. So I was in college, and yet I was finding time to go and write copy for an ad agency. So increased my interest in communication and advertising. And I was a huge fan of that space. And it also gave me a chance to write a bit. And also perhaps as a little kid, meet people who were bigger, better, from whom I tried to learn and who encouraged me. And, obviously I was feeling very good about the fact that here was this lady who ran the ad agency who took a chance on me,
Mm-hmm.
who said, here's this young kid, wants to write. Okay, let's give it a shot. Let's try and see if it can work. And that's something else that I've tried to do later in my life too, which is when I see young people, I'd like to bet on raw talent. I like to bet on that unripe fruit, to say that maybe they'll get it right. And I think the hunger, the passion that youngsters or people who may not know it all can bring to the table, I think can become fabulous. So that's really what I did, even while I was in college. And then, of course, went to work, started my career selling. And that's something else that I'd encourage everyone to do at some stage in their lives. I think you must go out and sell, because that teaches you a skill that's, I think, extremely vital in your life, which is to take rejection. Here you go, you think you've got something great to sell, you go and tell somebody, buy it, and the person says, no, I won't buy it. Again, not all of us are very good at it. We all want people to accept what we are saying. We want people to buy into our ideas. We want people to listen to what we are saying. But knowing that, you need to go and often you need to wait for the other person, it's humbling. It keeps you grounded,
True.
and I think it's a great experience. And so I started my career, sold soap, and then of course went on to do
Everything from
more.
soaps, cola, and diapers.
That's
Yeah.
true. That is true. Uh,
Yeah.
so I have had a career, and then I guess to fast forward that, after spending nearly 30 odd years in the corporate world,
Mm-hmm.
the second calling, as it were, kind of came, and I wrote a book. This is now 2009, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and got published in 2010. But I wrote a book, and that, I think, when it got published, it changed my life a little bit, in the sense that it suddenly suggested that I started speaking about the book, and I would be invited to speak a little bit more. And I always enjoyed that bit. So even while I was at work, I enjoyed those opportunities to speak, whether it was the annual company conference, which was this big event, or
Mm-hmm.
it was our regular monthly sales meets, or it was, a communication with the team in the office. I enjoyed this bit about speaking, and I really loved it, and a chance to perhaps tell people that maybe we can all get better. Maybe it doesn't matter if last month wasn't too good. Maybe it doesn't matter that our competitors is trampling all over us, but we can fight. We can get it right. I think this really was something that kind of enjoyed. The book happened, started to speak a lot more, and then of course I decided that that's really what I want to do for the rest of my life. And that, so in 2014, wow, it's almost 4 years now.
Wow.
In 2014 is when I kind of stepped out formally from the corporate world
Mm-hmm.
to pursue my passion, and that's what I do now.
So your last assignment was, you were heading the Kimberly-Clark lever, and you were in leadership position and had the corporate life. And as you mentioned, like you had those interests in storytelling and writing from the very early age in your life. But when did you find that this is something that I want to do? Whether is it like, had you always thought about that in some point of time in my life, I'm going to quit my job and get full time into being an author and speaking, or when did that realization happen, and what was that moment like?
One of Another big influence in my life has been a man called Brian Tracy. So I'm a big fan of Brian Tracy, and many years ago, someone gave me a set of audio tapes. It's called The Psychology of Achievement by Brian
Mm-hmm.
Tracy, and I was fascinated by what he had to say and how he said it. And I use that a lot in terms of, it helped me to clarify my own thinking. It certainly, beyond just the speaking bit, it influenced me in the way I might have lived my life. And then, of course, I felt good. And like I said, I would speak to sales teams, and I would be sitting in an airport waiting for a flight someday, and a man would walk up to me, and I'd probably not recognize him, but he would tell me that, 15 years ago or 20 years ago, he was a salesman with me in Siliguri.
Okay.
And then he would recall how I might have done something. And, without for a moment sounding boastful or any such thing, I'm just being honest. And the man would probably say something like, I still remember, and how something you said made a difference to my life. And, today he's like deputy general manager in this large company, and he's doing well for himself. And I'd feel so good about the fact
I'm sure.
that here was a
Yeah.
man who who kind of started life pretty much at the very beginning, or at the bottom of the ladder, as it were, and then has gone on to do well. And for some strange reason, seems to think that something I said or did made a difference to him. And I said, wow, this is so cool. And I quite liked that. And I felt that maybe the purpose of my life, maybe the thing that gives me the greatest joy is this bit about making a difference to somebody else's life, to share something I might have learned, to share something about the way I might think that could make a difference to somebody else's life. And I think that was fascinating. So I really enjoyed that bit. And I would speak a fair bit. I would grab every chance I got to speak. And I remember at some stage, I had the pleasure of meeting Brian Tracy and telling him that, I'm chucking up this, I want to quit. And I used to be CEO of another business at that time. And I said, I want to quit to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave me good advice. And he said, A, don't quit in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
B, he said, speak. And he says, speak for maybe 200 times. He says, speak at a school, at a college, at your local club, at a Rotary event. Anybody who calls you to speak and would have you speak, go speak.
Yeah.
You won't get paid for it,
True.
but speak. And if after 200 speaking gigs, if you still enjoy it, if you still want to quit and do it, then do it. He says, don't mean, it's not easy. It's not all roses. It might seem this cool, fun thing that you want to
Mm-hmm.
do, but get into it, do 200 of those. And then if you still feel like it, then quit. And I think that was great
Yes,
advice,
it
because
is.
that's pretty much what I did. Yeah.
So I think that's a very, very beautiful suggestion out there, not only in terms of speaking. And if you are thinking of leaving a job to do something that could be speaking or maybe writing or maybe to start your own venture or whatever that is, there need to be validation, right? Yeah, I mean, you can make it happen, or you are enjoying, which is more important than anything else. You are passionate about that. And what if you quit the job and next month you realize that this is not something that you want to do, right?
Exactly right. And I think, as I think of what you've done, Vijay, I think you've done pretty much um, exactly the same thing, which is that you started this whole podcasting thing almost as a hobby,
True.
as a
True.
passion, and you continue to with your day job, and you continue to do the things that you were doing at work, and then I guess this got wings. You could see that it's working. I'm guessing you enjoyed it. People said you're doing well with it.
True.
People said, "Wow, you're doing a great job." And I think it's after that stage that it gives you the confidence, and it also makes sure that we don't do things in a hurry. And you don't think. I think maybe the other piece on making this switch, and I'm again going back to what you might have done, is sometimes people make the mistake of saying, "I hate my job, and therefore I want to do something
True.
else." And I think that's the worst reason to try and make a
Mm-hmm.
switch. You shouldn't be podcasting, or you shouldn't have gone into podcasting because you didn't like what you were doing at work. If you didn't like what you're doing at work, learn to like it, learn to change
Mm-hmm.
it, find something else.
True.
Making this big switch through a negative vote is a bad idea. I think it's got to be that it's not that a bit like not because I love Caesar less, but because I love Rome more.
Mm.
And it's got to be
Yeah.
that.
Just because you hate your job and you're just trying to find something, then that, what if that is a momentary thing that you're enjoying for a couple of days or maybe a couple of weeks, and then you start hating that as well, right? So
Exactly right.
yeah, true. So okay, now this brings me to the point where you talk about finding your north, right? Which you talk on your speeches as well. So since people are working on their job and most of them say that they hate their job, right? But what's keeping them to keep working on their job, and what's stopping them to discover their true north?
I think we all get into a state of inertia. We feel comfortable with what we're doing. It sometimes becomes fashionable to speak about the things you don't like, and it's nice to say I don't like my boss, or I don't like my job, or I don't find freedom or authority or whatever else it is you're looking for. But what you don't say is, but I like the fact that I get this fat salary which keeps me going, and I like the fact that after 3 years I'll probably get to fly business class, and I'll get a bigger car, and I'll have more of something else.
Mm-hmm.
And and I think you get comfortable, and then you don't think too much about whatever else it is that you might want to do. I don't think you also try hard enough to try and figure out what else you might be able to do. So I think a sense of lethargy, you kind of settle into your comfort zone. And other than complaining about what's happening, you don't really do anything about trying to solve the problem.
Yeah, a lot of people do that. Like they keep complaining, but if you ask what are you doing to get out of this, or what is your next action, and they don't have anything that they have done. And I think they haven't thrown themselves into 10 different things, and just to test out what is it for me if this job is not for me, right? So I think, yeah. So now let's switch a bit of gears to the work that you do right now, which is speaking and writing books. And after leaving your job, you have already published 3 different books, and with including national bestsellers such as The Habit of Winning, The Secret of Leadership, and the recent one, You Too Can. I'd like to know a bit about teamwork, because you talk a lot about teamwork in your speeches and also on your book, You Too Can. And I love the story of how great team at Big Basket thinks and do things together. So how do you think a great team is formed, and what needs to happen?
I guess great teams don't always happen because somebody goes starts by saying, okay, next we're going to now form a great team. I think it starts because fundamentally you start to attract people who either are like-minded or share a common sense of what we want to do, or just enjoy working together. Maybe at the heart of a great team is this belief that it's team before me. Very often people say that I want to achieve my dream, and therefore now I want to form a great team. I think that's a tough one. You'll always find then that you're constantly focused on me, myself, my goal, my dream, my vision, and you're saying you want now the team to work together to make that happen. I think that's a tough one. Great teams happen when there are a bunch of people who say, hey, how can I help you to get better? How can I help you to make your dreams come true? How can I help you to become just a bit better than you might have been? And that suddenly starts making people say, wow, I want to help you. And then the other person said, I want to help him, and then her and someone else. And everybody then has come together, not because they're constantly asking, what's in it for me? How can I benefit from this? But about saying, how can we get it right together? How can we make it happen? And how can I help you to make something different? And I think if I go back to the big basket story, it's interesting how you have a bunch of people, all of whom extremely competent, who could individually but perhaps have been entrepreneurs who could have done something on their own, but all of them say, hey, none of us wants to be CEO.
Yeah.
None of us is too bothered about saying, I must be on the cover of that magazine next time and they talk about this, about our business. They're all happy saying, hey, I'd rather be at the back. I'm happy to let someone else do it. And I think this, being able to put yourself as subservient to the needs of the team, I think that's a good one. It also helps, I think, to have a leader who thinks like that. And eventually, teams are only as good as everybody else who gets in. But it's good to have a leader who actually thinks like that and who wants people to get better, who's got the interest of the team at heart, and who then inspires everybody to a goal which might have looked difficult, to a goal which might have looked like it's impossible to do. And yet everyone says, come on, let's give it a shot. I think that's important for me. If great teams, you will typically find happen when they have an ambition which seems just out of reach. Mm-hmm. You don't have a great team when they had all the resources that they needed and they set out to do something simple, and it happened. Great teams happen when you have a bunch of people on a boat and the boat capsizes and it's the Arctic and it's all frozen and death is staring them in the face and it looks like they will never get out of it. And yet after 2 years, they survive all of it and they come out alive. Now there is therefore here a leader and a team which says it doesn't matter that it's snowing, it doesn't matter that our boat is gone, it doesn't matter we don't have food. We will find a way to overcome all of this and come out alive. And when that's the kind of goal you set yourself, that's when I think the magic of teamwork begins to show up.
Would it be wrong to say that great teams, or maybe teams, are tested in the times of the tough phase or the challenges that the organization is going through, whether you are going to stick together and work to get it to other side of the tunnel, or you are parting your ways to do your own thing because the ship is just sinking?
Yeah. In general, I think it's true for all of us that it's the testing times, it's the crisis and the challenge that really brings out the true character of the individuals, the true character of teams. In good times, when everything is easy and nice, it's easy for everyone to be a good person, to
True.
be a good team player, to be a good leader. But it's when the chips are down, that's when I think the true metal shows through.
That's the time when best expresses out of yourself. That you can give your best when you are challenged or when you are put on the hardship.
Yep. I tell a story, Vijay, about tea bags and how leaders can learn something from a tea bag. And my first lesson really is that leaders are like tea bags.
Mhm.
It's only when you put them in hot water that you'll know how strong they really are. So I think that's true for tea
Yeah.
bags and it's true for leaders too.
So how do you derive lessons out of the smallest things of leadership lessons from the tea bags? I mean, who would have thought that, Prakash? So how do you come up with these interesting lessons of leadership from tea bag and teamwork from Matka Ford and and the stories from kites that are very very
Yeah.
important lessons. So how does this work?
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, I'm a bit of a observer. I'm in awe of the world around me, and I think that there's a lot that you can learn from even the smallest person or the smallest thing around you. And I sometimes think, to be fair, I've tried to ask myself, what is it that kind of works for me? And I think my mind has like two lenses at work, and one lens is the one through which all of us see, and I'm seeing what I'm seeing out there. And there is this other lens that is trying to kind of look at the same thing with a leadership perspective or a life lesson perspective and saying, wow, what can that teach us? Or is there a bigger message in what you see over there? So, it's like saying that you look out and you see a house with a large window. And I think this was, I'm trying to remember now, I think they say this about Amsterdam, and that the municipality in Amsterdam several years ago encouraged people to have large windows in their houses, because if you have a large window, you'll keep the house clean. And I said, wow, that's an interesting story. So even as the guide is telling you that that's why homes in Amsterdam have large windows, because it encouraged people to keep their houses clean. So my that one lens in my head is listening to him and seeing this, and the other lens is saying, wow, this would be so fascinating if all human beings also had that same principle. If you were visible, if people could see you, if you were transparent, and people could see what's on your mind, then you would make sure that you only have good thoughts in your head, that you have only positive stuff, that you're not thinking, how do I cheat the other person, but how you are always thinking of, how can I help someone else? How can I be a good person? Because we all have these large windows in our lives, in our bodies, which is what people can see through. And I say, wow, that would be interesting. So just as an example, and I just came up with it now, but to think that, look, maybe there are two ways of looking at everything. So when I see, when I saw the tea bag, and I said, hey, maybe there's an interesting lesson over here, and maybe that's how it kind of comes to me.
One thing which is very interesting, and even when I met you, and the ideas that you bounced off were very, very interesting. Like having conversation with the guy who runs the lift up and down, and
Yeah.
using that person to know about the characteristics and different kind of people that he meet throughout the day. Those were something, that with normal brain, you just don't think that there is a lesson out there or something that you can learn in that kind of circumstances, right? So are there anything that you have done to come out with those thinking? Do you push yourself, or are there any rituals that you can look back at? Oh, I think I have done this at certain point of time, and I think that's how where I got this kind of mindset. Or is it something that you born with?
Maybe the fundamental belief for me is that there is greatness in the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever it is, and there's a lady who sells vegetables close to where I live, and she's a legend. She must have started with a little cart, or sitting on the pavement of the street, but today she has a little shop of her own, and the entire neighborhood flocks to that store because they know she'll give you good quality vegetables, she'll have the right kind of stuff, it's priced well, you'll get what you want. But I'm amazed, and I think to myself that, wow, here's a lady. She might have been selling vegetables, but and she never went to school, but she knows more about inventory management and inventory turns and optimum order quantities, and she's learned all of that, and she's learned customer service, and so there is a lot that we can all learn from ordinary people. So maybe and I'm just being honest, and I think fundamentally I respect people I see, and I respect ordinary folks a lot more. They don't have any, they don't necessarily try and show that they are great, and they have no airs about them. So I'm a big fan of Uber drivers, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting in a car and someone's driving me, and I'm very keen to hear their stories.
Yeah.
I want to know, where did you come from? How did you get into this? What were you doing before this? Uh, what do good? Hey, wow! I see you have a fantastic rating, and so I'm keen to get a sense of that person.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just a natural interest in other people. Maybe
Yeah.
it's curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
But that stood me in good stead. And I must confess that many years ago, I was in a business where we had a crisis of sorts in our business. You might remember I used to sell cola. I used to work for a fantastic company called PepsiCO. And unfortunately, we had a situation in the country where there was this whole controversy about pesticide. Now, as someone who worked that business, I knew that it's not true. I said, hang on, it's not with us. It's really about groundwater. We clean the water, but the sugar that we use, is has a lot of pesticide. Now, all of it, the whole world. It's tough to convince people on what might be happening. But just to kind of cut a long story short, at that moment in time, I'm, in my office. We're getting into an elevator to go up, and in those days, this little lift in our building had a lift man.
Mm-hmm.
An old man who every morning I would say hello to and smile and say, how are you, etc., etc. But that was it. But I still remember that in the height of that crisis, that lift man looks at me and says, I know you wouldn't do something like this. Don't worry. This will blow over. You'll be all right.
Wow. Wow.
He didn't have to do it, but hey, he did that for me. And I'm saying, there is greatness in the people around us. And I think we just need to respect it, maybe look for it. And I think the world is suddenly a much better place for all of us.
Prakash, you have had opportunity to interact and work with some of the amazing leaders. So what are some of the habits, or maybe if you have to say three most important things that you have found common in great leaders that set apart great leaders from rest of the leaders?
I'm guessing there are loads of things that people do. And maybe even as I think of what those three habits that I might want to talk about, maybe I want to say something up before that, which is that, remember, there is no one formula to becoming a great leader. Maybe one of the things that none of us should try and do is to become like somebody else and then start to do everything that that person does. There are some natural traits. There are some things that make us uniquely who we are, and it's a good idea to try and play to those strengths. Having said that, I think there are some common things that good leaders do. I think they are very. The first one would be that they're very good at kind of having this dream or vision of something fantastic that they want the team to achieve. They manage to articulate it well to the team. They manage to communicate it to the team that this is where we are headed. This is what we want to do. And they manage to get that team to believe that we can do it. That, wow, I could be a part of this fantastic journey. That's what they make every individual believe. And they also make that individual believe that not only can I be a part of the journey, I can actually contribute to ensuring that this team can get there. And I think that's a great first trait for a leader to have. Have a vision, a dream, a goal, articulate it well to the team, and get the team to know that they are core stakeholders in that journey to success. And that's something that leaders do very well. I think something else that leaders do very well is to try and get to know their people. I've seen some fantastic leaders who invest a lot of time in getting to know people, in getting to know who's this person, and not just go by, a 3-line description of his role, or where did he study, or what did he do, or what was his previous role, but really an attempt to try and spend that, an evening with that person to understand what makes that person who he is. And I think maybe some of this has come from my own early career as a sales manager, where I would travel to a small town, and one of the things that my boss and mentor told me was that he'd insist that if you were traveling to an upcountry town, you had to spend the night there, because otherwise you become one of these tourist managers. Go in the morning, land at a comfortable hour, have a good lunch, spend a few hours talking to the customer or the person, and then you're in a hurry to get back because you need to be home that evening. He said, doesn't work. So if you were to stay back that night, that gives you a chance to then perhaps, have a conversation with the people you have met. It could be that poor sales guy there, the sales officer, it could be a distributor. One of them will probably call you home. So you get a chance to go to their homes, meet the parents. And you suddenly realize that, hey, you know, for those parents, that is such a big deal that their son works for this great Indian company, and he is a territory sales in charge, and he's arrived in life.
True.
And I think it's good to see their dreams, their aspirations, their challenges and frustrations, and I think it just makes all of us better. It gets you also to understand that person a lot more. It gets you to know that person more. And then 2 years later, 5 years later, when you're taking a call on a person and you're trying to decide, should this person stay or go? Should this person get promoted? Should this person be given another role? I think it helps you that you're taking that decision having known what that person is all about. So I think good leaders take the effort to kind of get to know people. And the third trait, I think, is I think good leaders take decisions. They're not scared to take a call. They don't worry about all the time about will this be right. I think there's no way of guaranteeing that every decision you take will be correct. There's no way of guaranteeing success in all the initiatives that you have. But I think good leaders don't waste time agonizing over these decisions. They try and assess all the information that's available. They hear out whoever else has to be heard, and then they take a call. They take a decision. And they are willing to take a decision and say, hey, if it goes wrong, so be it. But at that moment, it looked like the right thing to do, so we did it. So I think sometimes you can have great leaders who try very hard to get consensus, or who are very scared to take a risk in life, or who are constantly trying to say, I need to get this right. I can't afford to fail. I can't afford to get it wrong. And I think that can become a problem. So maybe those are three things, have a great vision, get to know your people, and take decisions. Maybe that's a quick set of three. I could probably add 300 more, but maybe we'd stop at three.
Absolutely. These are amazing lessons, powerful lessons. And getting to know your team is something that I think is very, very powerful. The moment that, you do those smallest things as meeting their families and getting to know them, the way that employee look at you and the organization totally, that's totally changed. And, they do have trust in the organization, and they are like, they can be more honest to the organization and put their best. Love that one. Now, talking about entrepreneurship, there is a tremendous amount of patience and perseverance that needs to go to build or get something big done, right? But this is the world of instant gratification. I upload an image and I need to get comment within a minute, or maybe likes and loves, right? And if I want something, then I can go to Amazon and just purchase it within a minute, and it gets delivered next day, which is feeding on our minds that things that we want in our life are just clicks away. So how one can develop that kind of patience and perseverance to get something big done in their life? Yeah, I mean, especially in this world where patience is getting tough for people to build or develop.
Interesting. And I think what you've talked about, of course, is a real challenge for most people. But perhaps that's really what separates the winners from the rest. You need some clarity first on what is it that you're looking for in your life. And an example I use on this is to say that, most of us are standing at a bus stop waiting for a bus that will take us to our destination. And the mistake we make is that the first bus that comes in, everybody's getting onto it. And we also want to jostle and get onto it because we see everybody getting onto it. And then we are not pausing to think, hey, is this bus going to take me to where I want to go? I think you need to know I'm standing at the bus stop not to get into a bus. I'm standing at a bus stop to get a bus that will take me to where I want to go. And we get tempted because we are standing at a bus stop and we feel that we'll get left out. My goodness, everybody's getting into the bus, so let me also get onto it. Or the bus looks so nice, so let me get onto it. And that's the mistake that we can make. I think you need to be clear about what is it that you are trying to do? Where is it that you want to go? And if you're clear about that, then you realize that, hey, the first bus has come, it's looking good, everyone's getting onto it, but it's not going to take me to where I want to go, so I'll wait. And then I might be alone and everybody else might be gone, but I know that, hey, 5 minutes later, maybe 10, another bus will come and that will take me to where I want to go. So I think having that clarity about where you want to go, what is it that you want to achieve, I think that is really the first step to developing the patience and the perseverance and the grit and the resilience that will allow you to kind of eventually get it right.
I would want to understand if is there anything or any way that you have encountered that has worked for yourself or the people you have worked with in terms of knowing yourself and defining vision for yourself. Are there anything that you'd like to share on that?
I'd probably say two things. First, whatever it is that you're doing, try to do it well. We all get fascinated and tempted by what might be or the road not taken. And then we are constantly fantasizing about that. But maybe the first lesson in life to make a success of whatever it is that you do, make it work, be good at it. It doesn't have to be the thing that you've always loved. It doesn't have to be your dream job. It doesn't have to be the one relationship that you always make it work. I think that will teach you that life is not about being lucky and being dealt a great hand, but it's about learning to play the hand that you're dealt, playing it well, playing it as well as you can. And therefore, if you're writing code for that software company and you think it sucks and you think that it's not what you want to do and you think you have a lousy boss, work on saying, how can I become the best coder this business has ever had? How can I make sure that I improve my relationship with my boss so that I start to respect him more and he starts to like me a lot more? So start to work on getting it right. I think that's the first bit, because then it teaches you there's no getting away. There's no escaping from the real world. Otherwise, the risk you will run is whatever you choose to do, you will find that you're not enjoying it, not liking it, and you're then looking to do something else all the time. You're constantly looking for the next move, the next job, the next career break, the next relationship, the next everything. That's the first one. The second one, in terms of being able to find what is it that might work for you, I'm a fan of this idea of the Japanese idea of ikigai, and you've probably heard of it, and I'm sure lots of people may know it. But just to kind of quickly capture that again, I think it's really to try and find the intersection of these three or four things. And the first is to try and find out what do you really enjoy doing, and what makes you happy, what gives you joy, what is it that you really enjoy doing. So that's the first one to look for. The second is, what are you uniquely good at? And I think that's an important one. What are you uniquely good at? And I think that's an interesting one, because it's about saying that, I'm good at it. I'm pretty good is not enough. What are your unique strengths? What is it that people say you do better than anyone else? My goodness, you're so good at it. What's that second step? That's really the second one to look for. The third is, what what adds has value. It must have value. What is it that you do that can have value? And I say this in the context of saying that it's got to have value. People must be willing to pay for it. Even if you don't need the money, people must be willing to pay for what you do. So you might say that I'm very good at cleaning potatoes, and I really enjoy cleaning potatoes. But if people are not going to be putting too much value on that and say, I don't really need you to do it, then it's unlikely to be something that you will be able to make a life out of. And maybe the fourth one to add to this is something that then makes a difference to the world we live in. I think it must make a difference, and you must find a way to say that the big man said it right. How do I make a small dent in the universe? And I think we all, in our own ways, can make that small dent in the universe. And you must try and say, how do I find the intersection of what do I enjoy, what am I uniquely good at, what has value, and what can make a difference to this world? And if you try and put them together and look for that common space there, you will probably discover what is it that is truly the calling that you were meant to live. What is it that would be the best use of that time that you're going to spend on this earth?
Wow, I really love those lessons. Prakash, thank you for sharing those amazing, interesting lessons there. And I'm sure that there is a lot for people to learn on this. And one of the things that you have mentioned earlier in this conversation was how Brian Tracy has helped you in a way to, take this course or step in your life. And which brings me to the importance of having mentors in our life. which is also the way of saying that you don't have to make those mistakes and you can learn from others who already has done that, right?
Mhm.
Who has made those mistakes and who has been successful in their life. So you can learn from both of them. So do you have mentors yourself now? And how do you find, or what is your approach in taking someone as mentor in your life?
So yes, I've been lucky to have had a mentor in my life. So very early in my career, I had the privilege of working with a man called Suman Sinha, and as it happens, across two organizations and one lifetime, I've had a chance to kind of work with him, and I think he's been a tremendous source of learning, inspiration, and a lot of what I'd like to believe that I've learned about leadership and teams and working in building organizations is stuff that I learned from Suman Sinha. So he's been a huge influence on my life and a big mentor. While I was doing this book on entrepreneurs, I met someone who gave me an interesting lesson. He talked about the role of mentors and how a mentor had played a huge role in his life. And I asked him the question that Vijay, you just asked me about how do you find mentors, and he gave me a very interesting response. And he said, most of us, when we are looking for mentors, are looking for someone who can help us. And we are saying, how can I find somebody who can help me in my career? How can I find somebody who can help me to do a better job? And he says, flip it. He says, when you're looking for a mentor, find someone in a position of authority who will say, how can I help him or her to do a better job? How can I become the go to person for that leader? How can I become the person that he will turn to and say, I need to get this done and I know who can do it for me? Become that kind of person. And suddenly he says that person will become a mentor, and then that person will do everything to help you to get it right. But the starting point is to find someone other. And then I still remember, he told me about a song, an interesting song from a Hindi film. And he said, that's the mantra for finding a mentor. And the song was something which goes like this, which says, Tum apna ranj ho gham, apni pareshani mujhe de de. और मुझे दे दो तुम अपना रंज हो गम अपनी परेशानी मुझे दे दो. And he says that's what you should be saying to your mentor. Give me your problems in life, give me your challenges.
Mm.
And that's a good way to find a mentor in your life.
I think that's brilliant. I love that. If you have to look back at 23 years old Prakash Iyer and give a message to him, what would be your message to 23-year-old Prakash who might have just started with his professional life?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think at one level, I'd probably as I look back, I've often, maybe it's again a mindset thing. I've often never really regretted anything, and I've always felt good about the stuff that I might have done. And even when I've made mistakes, I felt that's been a good reason, and it's taught me something. I've learned something from it. But what's the advice I would give that 23-year-old Prakash as I look back now? Um, Maybe a couple of things. One, I think, unfortunately for some of us, our peak years in our work life and career also coincide with the years when our children are really young and growing. And I wish I would tell that young Prakash to probably find that balance just a little bit better. Make sure that you are there for those kids a lot more. I keep telling myself I was there and I've had a huge influence on my children, and I don't think it's not. Uh, but I'm torn, and I sometimes think I wish, today when I spend time with a little kid and I have more time in my hands to do that, and if I see another friend's child or someone else's kid, I love children. I spend a lot of time with them, and then my wife will tell me, I wish you'd spend as much time with your own children.
Hmm.
And I tell her I did, but she says no, you probably didn't. And maybe the fact that you had to travel and spend time in the market and make sure targets were being met and come home late in the night and maybe I wish
Yeah.
I would probably tell him find a way to spend more time with your kids because they'll grow up and they'll grow up faster than you know. So maybe that's something that I would probably tell him. The second thing I would tell him is, Prakash, if you have this other passion in life, don't wait too long. Push it. Try and find ways to make that happen. Try and find ways to kind of do something with it.
What is the one vision or dream that you have right now that you are very, very passionate about achieving in your life?
I I'm really excited by the idea of making a million leaders bloom in the world that I live in. Um, I've often felt that we all get taught how to read and how to write and how to add and subtract while we're in school, and then we get taught, you know, principles of operations management, or we get taught accounting and a whole lot else. But somewhere along the way, people don't really teach us what does it take to be a good human being, what does it take to be a good leader, a good team player, what does it take to become the kind of person who pushes herself or himself to become as good as you can be. And I'd like to be that person who kind of steps in and helps each of us to perhaps turn on that one light inside our head, which can help us to become just a bit better than we might have otherwise been. That's really what excites me. And I think whether I'm writing, I'm coaching, or I'm speaking, I'm hoping that in whatever I do, I'm making that little difference to that some other person who I might have had the privilege of coming in contact with.
Yeah, absolutely, Prakash. You are definitely, moving in that direction to make 1 million leaders bloom around the world. And as you mentioned, through your books, the way you write and the way you speak is inspiring. And I'm sure there are so many people out there who has got a lot of stories to come back to you and share with you. Prakash, you know what, you made a difference in my life. Thank you so much for that. So, yeah. So now it's time for the enlightening round. Are you excited?
Yes, I am. Always am.
So, Prakash, what inspires you to do everything that you do?
What inspires me to do everything that I do? Uh, I think that, like I said, the realization that I could possibly make a small difference in another person's life.
Which one daily habit do you believe has been game changer for you in your success journey?
I think I take maybe 30 minutes a day, every day, to just dream, to look back, reflect, think, dream. And that's I think an interesting thing, for something I would recommend to other people too.
I want to know more about that. Could you walk me through the process, or what does it looks like?
No, I think because of the fact that we are all strapped for time, and all of us think multitasking is such a cool thing, we are all uncomfortable not doing anything. We are constantly trying to, utilize our time, so to speak. We think that if we are not doing anything, we are wasting time, and I'd probably say that's not true. So every day I would, very often it could be that I'm sitting at my desk and not looking at a screen. I'm just thinking, I'm just doing something, I'm trying to reflect, and maybe that's when I get some ideas around what I might want to do next. Maybe something to here's something that I could write about. Maybe I think of something that happened in the past which could be an interesting lesson. Maybe I think of, so I'm just thinking, I'm just dreaming at some level. It
Hmm.
could happen when I'm sitting in an aircraft. It could be I'm waiting for someone. It could be I'm out on a golf course, but I'm lost at that moment. And I think it's a good idea to be lost.
Yeah, sure. So, could you share a book or two that has influenced you personally in the recent past?
So I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell, and therefore I'd probably say that I like his style and the kind of stuff that he does, and his ability to turn around and look at what might have at seemingly small incidents or some research somebody else might have done, and then to try and extrapolate that to get lessons from for all of us. So that's, I mean, I'm a big fan. So Outliers by Gladwell, I think, is something that I thought was, wow, very, very good. I like books which are in this intersection of life and perhaps psychology or economics, and therefore someone like a Dan Ariely, who wrote a nice little book called Predictably Irrational. I like that because it teaches you about how we think and how we might think we are these rational human beings, but we actually behave in a pretty predictably irrational manner. So I like that intersection of science, psychology, learning with the way we might be in our lives. I'm also a big fan of sport and what it might teach us. And I'm trying to think now that there's a lovely book called Bounce by Matthew Syed, and he talks about, learning resilience, learning what sport can teach us about life, and that's something else that excites me. So I also am a big fan of cricket and sport in general, and I love how you can draw lessons from sport for the larger game of life.
Could you share some online tool or app that you use on a regular basis that maybe helps you in becoming better organized or maybe disciplined or something like that?
I wish I would have a great answer for that one, but I just tend to use a very simple function on my phone, which is the notes feature, where I keep making notes for myself. I don't use some of these more, how do I put it, sexier apps, perhaps, which do it. Maybe I should, and maybe you should give me some advice on that. But I use notes extensively. And if I'm on a call with a potential client, or if I'm on a call with someone who's trying to brief me with someone I'm working with, I would constantly have notes open to keep making notes of whatever we are talking about. And my favorite page on the notes, of course, is my writing pad, where I keep, if I get an idea about something I could write or speak about, that goes in there.
Mhm.
I've learned that our memory is a very, very tricky thing.
Yeah.
And very often we forget. We might have this great idea, and half an hour later, you can break your brains to figure out what that was, but you'll never get it back. And I think writing it down helps. So I write down everything that I need to do.
Amazing. So, Prakash, we have come to an end of this interview. I have only one question left for you. But before that, if people would like to learn more about you and your work, and maybe attend one of the speeches or the talk that you are giving, or maybe programs that you are organizing, what's the best possible way for them to reach out to you and connect?
So I'm a very simple guy. Anything that you want to do, you'll probably find me on most of the usual places. So on social media, you'll find me, whether it's on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter. So follow me, and if I'm doing something which is an open program, you'll usually find that I'll mention it somewhere there. But otherwise, you'll also find a way to just reach out and connect with me and send me a message, and I'm more than happy to connect, make new friends, and if I can help in any way, more than happy to do that.
And guys, also make sure that you get his latest book, You Too Can. It is filled with amazing stories of great entrepreneurs of the country, right from the one that we have mentioned about the big basket. And also there are some other amazing stories that you can take a lot of values from. And that, as Prakash mentioned earlier in this conversation, it was like you sitting next to the entrepreneur on airplane and asking your questions, every little questions. And as you must have noticed by now, Prakash is such an observer, and he asks the minute things that you can ever think of. So I really enjoyed reading that book, and I'm sure that you can get a ton and ton of values in entrepreneurship from his book. So I'll link that up on show notes page of this episode. Make sure that you get his book, and also get in touch with Prakash and follow him on LinkedIn. He writes a lot of articles, and his videos and the videos that we talked about, the teabag and the deriving lessons from kite and deriving lessons from unusual thing that you might have never thought. Just go and watch those videos. Maybe I will link some of them on show notes page of this episode. Now, Prakash, here is the last question for you.
Yep.
Imagine that you are standing on a stage on the biggest stadium that has ever been built in the history of the world, and there are millions of people on that stadium looking at you and eagerly and passionately wanting to listen to you. And you have been given 1 minute of the time to share the most important lesson that you have learned in your life. So what would be your message?
Whoa. Just standing in front of this large crowd, I wouldn't have a message to give. I just probably soak it all in, and love the fact that, hey, God has truly been kind to put me in this place where there's this huge audience waiting to listen to me. And I'd probably go back to being that 8-year-old child standing on school stage on Independence Day, and I'd probably be frozen and wouldn't be able to say anything. But if I can muster my wits around me, what would I tell them? Phew, I'd probably have a lot to tell them about believing in yourself, about being a good human being, about helping other people. But if I had to have one message, one lesson that I'd say I've learned in my life, and I want you to remember, I'd probably tell them the story of Joseph Heller, who wrote Catch 22. It's an interesting story that kind of influenced me a bit too. And so, story goes that Joseph Heller was out with a friend, and they were at a cocktail party at an investment banker's fancy home in just outside New York. And as they were there, the friend who had taken Joseph Heller along said, look at all these people around, and they were all drinking the finest wines, and everyone's having a great time. And then the friend said something to Joseph Heller. He said, do you realize that our host, this investment banker, probably makes more money in a day than you made in a lifetime? And Joseph Heller takes a sip of the wine and says, yep, that's probably true. But you know what? That person will never have something that I have. And the friend says, what's that? And Joseph Heller says, enough. I have enough. And I think that's a powerful lesson for all of us in our lives. It's important for us to figure out our own enough. You need to know when you have it.
I really enjoyed having this conversation with you, Prakash. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure entirely, Vijay. Like I said, thank you so much for having me here. I'm a big fan of the work that you're doing. Good luck on your journey as you now go into full-time being a podcaster, podcasting coach, and a terrific guy to know. It's been a pleasure knowing you. Pleasure talking to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. theinspiringtalk.com/5656. Guys, I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode with Prakashs Iyer. If you did, make sure that you share this episode with your friends and family by visiting the show notes page at theinspiringtalk.com/5656. And you can also access all the links to resources such as books and videos mentioned in this episode by visiting theinspiringtalk.com/5656. And to finish this, guys, this new year, you have got to act on the dreams that you have on the back of your mind. Don't let any excuses and challenges come in your way. The only way to get a step closer to your dream is by taking action. After all, your dreams doesn't work for themselves. You have to. Thank you so much for listening. I'll catch you in the next. Now, go out there and do something inspiring.